Class is now in session 9, Professor Hockey, and today we'll be discussing the game between the Sharks and the Coyotes, in which the Sharks have lost 3-2. So after getting that win against the Canucks to end a 6-game losing streak, the Sharks get right back on track there with this loss. Now, at the very least, this was not a terrible loss to take. I actually thought the Sharks looked pretty good throughout the majority of this game. They limited a lot of what the Coyotes could do, but in the end, you're in the middle of December, your team is not in the playoff spot, and you lose this game. It's just not a good thing to have happen. Now, this first period started off a pretty early goal on for the Coyotes. That was Carl Soderberg who took the lead, but then later on in the first period, in the last couple of minutes, it would be Tomas Hertl on a beautiful shot to tie it up at 1. In the second period, we'd have Derek Stepan take a lead for the Coyotes once again to make it 2-1, and then we'd be Hertl once more on another beautiful shot to tie it up at 2. Going into the third period, it's a pretty close, pretty tightly checked third period, but some decent chances either way, and it would come down to just the last 2.5 minutes of the third period. It would be Taylor Hall in his first game as a Coyote, of course. He comes racing down the wall, chases down Brendan Dillon, gets this puck away from him, makes the pass in front to Ekman Larsson, and then takes an unfortunate bounce off of a player in front, goes in past Dell, and the Sharks are unable to tie it up. Now, the loss is one thing, but what was just so unacceptable is what happened here in the last minute of the game. So the Sharks, of course, are pulling the goalie, whatever, and the Coyotes end up taking a penalty, so that makes it 6-on-4. Now, there is some argument of whether or not 6-on-4 is better than 5-on-4 because of the fact that the team that is at shorthanded and is down 2 players now does have the ability to ice the puck. So it's normally not something you want to do, go down a man in the last minute or so, but it's not the worst thing in the world. However, what the Coyotes then do in the last 40 seconds is take another penalty and end up down 6-on-3. And what ends up happening in the last 40 seconds is the Sharks, not only do they not score, but they don't even generate a single chance, a single shot on net. It was, credit to the Coyotes penalty killers, but it was unacceptable that 6 players on the ice here for the Sharks, the 6 players that they apparently want to have on the ice, Carlson, Burns, Couture, Hertl, Meyer, Kane, who had actually all been having pretty solid games, but they can't even get a single chance on a 6-on-3. It really goes to show how much the struggles of the Sharks power play have been this season. But anyway, first thing to talk about would be Arundel, as he got the second consecutive start here. He was okay in this game, didn't have to be called upon too much in the first 50 or so minutes of this game to make many saves. He didn't have much of a chance at all on the Stepan goal, although he probably could have had the Soderberg one. It was in the last half of the third period where he made a couple of huge saves, but unfortunately this one by Ekman Larsson didn't have much of a chance on that one either. Ends up costing the Sharks the game. Not terrible by Dell by any means, certainly not the player necessarily who's at fault for this game at all. However, it also wouldn't surprise me with this loss if Jones actually finds himself back in the crease for the game on Saturday. Next, I'll talk about a few lineup changes, as there actually were a couple here. So Suomela came off of the IR, ends up back into the lineup. He was, I guess, replacing Noah Gregor on that fourth line. He basically did not much of anything. He even got a couple of shifts with the Thornton-Hertl line because LeBanc ended up getting injured at some point in the second period. It was potential concussion for LeBanc, so there could be some worry there. But Suomela didn't look very good. Then it was Dylan Gambrell coming back into the lineup as well, since Blickfeld ended up getting benched and Sorensen was moved up to the third line. Gambrell looked pretty decent, I guess you could say. He was certainly better than what Gregor or Blickfeld were showing in the past couple of games. But the third lineup change I'll talk about was Jacob Middleton coming in. Now, I believe Ferraro was injured, as that's really the only reason I can see here that you would put Middleton in. And Middleton was just awful, really. In the few games Middleton has played, I think this was maybe his 4th or 5th game of his NHL career, he has never impressed me, and not only has he not impressed me, he's actually disappointed me so many times. He really just looked like he was an AHLer in an NHL game. It was just really bad. I sincerely hope he doesn't get many games. I know Prout is still injured. I know Ferraro now here, Shemek now here, so it could be a problem, but honestly, it seems like it might even be a better option if those 3 players remain injured going into the game on Saturday to bring up a different defenseman, because Middleton was just really bad in this game, at least in my opinion. Next, I'll be talking about Erik Karlsson, who I thought had an extremely strong game on the offensive side. The defensive side was also quite good, although a couple of mistakes here or there, but his offensive play was just insane in this game. I mean, really that showed that was just in the first few minutes of the first period. It was maybe his first, potentially second shift of the game. He was just all over the puck. It feels like the puck was magnetized onto him. He kept the puck in multiple times. He was making so many insane plays. Later on, he had a beautiful pass that led to Hertl's first goal in this game. And it was just a great game from Erik Karlsson. The Sharks have not necessarily had much of a world beater, I guess you could say, on their roster in a long time. Thornton was it once upon a time. But, in the past few years, while the Sharks have been a very, very good team, they haven't really had that star player. Pavelski has been good to score goals, but he was never really someone to take over the game. That would same go with Couture. Maybe Hertl is sort of there. Brent Burns has obviously been a huge point scorer, but he was never someone like that, I guess you could say. He sort of just racked up the assists. But Erik Karlsson has the potential to be that for the Sharks. I believe he showed it at times in this game, and it really gives me hope for later on in the season if he can maybe translate that into more offense for the Sharks. And finally, I'll talk about the first line. The first line is Kane, Couture, Meier. It's been Kane, Couture, Meier here since Bob Booner took over, and I feel like it's been a very effective line for the Sharks in all three of those games. Tonight was no different. Obviously, it leaves a sour taste in your mouth in those last couple of minutes of the third period where they failed to get anything done on a 6-on-3 and those three players were on the ice. But I liked Couture and Meier's game. I liked Kane's game early on, although it did fall off a bit in the last 20-30 minutes of the game. But all in all, a solid game from the first line, and that's something the Sharks need, because the fact that obviously it's no secret they lack some depth in the offensive department, so getting good performances from their first line is important. But that will do it for this review. The Sharks will be back in action on Saturday, so a pretty sizable break here considering the Sharks have a lot more, well, maybe not a lot, but do have a lot of games played this season compared to some of the other teams. And they will be facing off against the defending Stanley Cup champs, the team that eliminated them in the Western Conference Finals last season. That would be the St. Louis Blues. The Sharks, their first chance this season to get revenge on that team that really took away one of their best shots in franchise history at winning the Stanley Cup. Obviously, there were some injuries there, but the Blues were definitely a team that accentuated those injuries, so the Sharks will be looking to see if they can get revenge and if they can get back into the win column. Class dismissed.